Most economists agree on the importance of human capital in determining a country's standard of living, and there's been a large amount of research that shows that education increases workers' productivity and thereby increases their incomes. And education also has other benefits, such as improving individuals' health, both of them and of their children. International organizations, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, completely endorse the importance of education for economic and social development. Indeed, one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted at the United Nations a few months ago states the following, that the goal is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. One consequence of this consensus among policymakers is large amounts of money are being spent on education in developing countries. Governments in those countries spend about $1 trillion every year on education. In addition, parents of children are spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year. We don't have exact numbers on that, but hundreds of billions of dollars on their children's education. So we're talking about huge amounts of money being spent on education. But the question is getting these kids into school, is that increasing the stock of human capital? Are these kids learning the skills they need to become productive workers? So let me now go through the progress that's been made on education and the trends since 1980. The first thing to point out is that government expenditures on education have increased quite a lot in developing countries. First of all, in Latin America, in real terms, spending has doubled since 1980. In the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, it's tripled, basically threefold increase. And then in East Asia, a fivefold increase, and in South Asia, a sevenfold increase in government spending on education. And in accompanying these increases in education is increases in enrollment rates at all levels. I'll focus on primary and the secondary levels. First of all, at the primary level, now, using data from about 2010 or even more recently, every region of the world, the gross primary enrollment rate is 100% or higher, which means almost all kids are going through schooling. And at the secondary level, the increases are even larger since 1980. For example, in Latin America, in 1980, the secondary school gross enrollment rate was 42%. Today, or in 2010, it's 90%, almost 100%. Finally, you can look at primary school completion rates, because sometimes kids are enrolled but they don't finish. In almost all areas of the world, they're getting close to 90% or higher. In fact, in Latin America, it went up from 84% in 1980 to basically 100% in 2010, which means that virtually every child in Latin America is completing primary school. So in terms of getting kids into school, there's been major success. What's less successful is actually making sure they're learning when they're in school. In particular, there's programs that now compare different countries, both developed and developing countries. One of them is called the Program for International Student Assessment, the PISA program. That program, the test scores, the ones that are comparable over the time started around the year 2000. And in those we see basically two things are coming out of this test score data. One is that developing countries, including Latin American countries, generally score much lower on these tests than do children in developing countries, so they're learning less. But second of all, there isn't any obvious trend in terms of catching up with developed countries. In some countries there are upward trends over time. I'm talking from about 2000 to 2009 or 2012. Chile, Colombia, Peru, Tunisia, and Turkey show upward trends. But in other countries, the trend is flat or even decreasing. So there's still problems in terms of getting kids to learn once they're in schools. So what can be done about this? Let me just mention a few things that people are looking at now. They're not so much looking at building more schools, because now we've got kids in schools, but instead they're looking at what happens inside the schools once kids are there. In particular, they're looking at incentives that are faced by teachers, in particular rewarding teachers who do a good job, whose students are doing very well. Also incentives to students, so they have stronger motivations for attending regularly and studying and things like that. And finally, more generally, changing the ways that schools are organized. So those are what we're looking at in the research that's going on today.